Hello, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Director's Cut, a podcast by the Directors Guild of America, featuring today's top directors sharing behind-the-scenes stories of their latest films and insights into the craft of directing. Please take a second to subscribe to our show wherever you get your podcasts. This episode takes us behind the scenes of director Ron Howard's new documentary, Pavarotti, which examines the life and career of famed opera tenor Luciano Pavarotti. Featuring never-before-seen footage, concert performances, and intimate interviews, the film takes an in-depth look at the lasting legacy of the musical icon affectionately dubbed the People's Tenor. In addition to Pavarotti, Mr. Howard's filmography includes the feature films Splash, Backdraft, Far and Away, The Paper, The Da Vinci Code, Angels and Demons, and In the Heart of the Sea. The documentary features The Beatles' 8 Days a Week, The Touring Years, and Made in America, and the documentary television series Breakthrough, The Age of Aging. He won the DGA Award for Outstanding Directorial Achievement in Feature Film in 1996 for Apollo 13, and again in 2002 for A Beautiful Mind, and was nominated for 1985's Cocoon and 2008's Frost Nixon. Mr. Howard also serves as the second vice president of the Guild. Following the documentary series screening of the film at the DGA Theater in Los Angeles, Mr. Howard spoke with director Ondi Timoner about filming Pavarotti. Listen on for their discussion.
I've seen it a bunch of times, but I wanted to see it here, so it's good. We made a good investment.
I'm not sure what we did. Do we know?
Well, surround and better optics, and
it was always
Chris
the best.
Nolan was all over it. John Favreau, they were in deep. I was nodding my head and cheering them on, but they really committed a lot of time to trying to get this to absolute state of the art.
If you're going to go state of the art, Chris Nolan is the guy you want supervising the job.
You bet.
So Pavarotti, why Pavarotti?
Well, Nigel Sinclair, who I'd worked with on the scripted movie Rush about Formula One racers.
I love that film.
Thank you.
Great film.
And but he's done a number of really interesting, great documentaries, especially music documentaries. And he saw a thing that I had an opportunity to do, which was my first experience in the doc world. Just to follow Jay-Z's music festival, the backstage and everything that was going on this music festival he had called Made in America, and it was the initial festival that he was curating. I had this opportunity, and I had always been just so intimidated by documentaries, a fan. And I sort of, fantasized a little bit about someday trying to do that because I was always interested in journalism, and I really enjoy the research side of doing scripted, projects based on real events. I love all that. I love history, but I was intimidated, and this opportunity came my way with a very short window. I had to decide very quickly. Well, I'm on the board of the Jacob Burns Film Center, and I'm wearing their hat right now. And they're a great group in Westchester County. And it's a film society, but they also have a lot of learning programs, educational programs, and it's very ambitious, and they're doing great work there, Jacob Burns Film Center. But the late, great Jonathan Demme was on the board. He's always been very friendly and very supportive to me. Great documentarian, in addition to, of course, being an award-winning narrative director. And so I took him aside when it was over, and I said, look, Jonathan, I've got this chance to do this. And I don't know whether I'm just setting myself up for trouble. I don't want to fail at this, but what do you think? He said, in his Jonathan Demme, do it, man, come on. But he nailed it. He actually said two things that nailed it for me personally. He said, first of all, you're going to love it because you'll be able to use more of your muscles that you've developed than you probably think you'll be able to use. Secondly, the documentaries don't go on the same time clock. So you can move back and forth between your scripted project and your documentary project, and you're not shortchanging either. It's going to refresh your thinking. And he said, but the other thing is, you have to go into it believing you know the story, shooting as though you know the story, interviewing as though you know the story, but you have to realize you don't. You're going to discover the story as you go. This is turning into a really long answer, but it's partly it's what I really love about it. So I had a good experience on the Jay-Z doc. I found he was right. I was able to put a lot of myself into this, and I found it really satisfying creatively, and I learned a lot. Well, Nigel saw it and liked it, and he came to me and said, I think the Beatles are interested in doing a doc just about their touring years. Do you think this would be interesting? I thought about it. I did a little reading, some listening, and I'm not a Beatles fanatic, not encyclopedic about them at all. But I suddenly had this idea. With the Jay-Z movie, I had said, well, maybe we'll do it like Nashville, and we'll cover it, the festival from a lot of different perspectives and sort of see what it all adds up to thematically. And with this one, suddenly talking about just the touring years and doing a little bit of reading about it, I said, I think that we should do it like Das Boot. These guys are in this submarine, they're in this bubble, and they're on this journey, and really all they have is each other, and a lot of stuff's going on out there in the world. But occasionally we'll cut outside and we'll see how the submarine's doing. Well, we'll also put into context what the Beatles mean to the world, but really what we want to do is be on the ride with them. And that's what I pitched to the Beatles, and to sort of get that launched. I loved it. I was scared, terrified, but I loved the experience. I discovered that not until 3 weeks before we locked and one other final interview came in that sort of flipped our whole third act around in an amazing way, and I never would have thought of it. And
what was that?
Well, there was a date they were supposed to play in I think it was Jacksonville, Florida, I think, and it was segregated. And when they found out it was segregated, they said, "Well, we're not going to do that." So we had acknowledged that as a fact. We didn't know much more about it. Then a woman named Kitty Oliver made herself known to us. We found her, and she was willing to come in and do an interview. And of course, a lot of the interviews, as you know better than anybody, don't even make it in. So you never know what you're going to get. In fact, on the day that we were doing some pickups and stuff with Ringo Starr here, she came in and did another interview, and it was very moving and entertaining and transported us, and it was pretty amazing, and it wound up being, it really brought home what it meant, what they had done, and for them it was just logic. It was just sort of their sense of what was right, which said a lot about the band in a particular way, and it informed a lot of things as it related to them wanting to give up finally. Or give up touring. So changed the whole third act. All right, so all that, we had a great time doing it. Paul Crowder was the editor. Mark Monroe worked on it as a producer and a sort of a writer, and we just had a terrific collaboration. Michael Rosenberg from Imagine was deeply involved. There were others on the team. A lot of fun for me, and a great outcome. So then the question was, who else? So this was a little more intentional, and started talking about subjects, and Nigel pitched the idea of Pavarotti, and because he was coming up on 10 years since his death, and he thought the family. He knew they were doing some things to sort of celebrate that, and he has a foundation, he has a museum, and he felt like it might be a good time to tell the story, and we might get the kind of cooperation that we'd need. And we discussed it. Now this was the group kicking it around, and I said, well, I know even less about opera than I remembered about the Beatles. But I might know more about opera than I knew about going to the moon before Apollo 13. And let me look at some footage and read. And he was so charismatic. So for me, I felt like this was a really interesting opportunity. I've never had a chance to do a musical, but just from watching some of the arias and then actually getting the text to understand, what he was singing, I thought, I bet there's a chance we can make an opera about Pavarotti using these arias and tell his story because his life is rather operatic in a way, and that would be interesting. We could tell his story. We can offer some insight into the art form, and we can deal with it structurally in a way that really uses the music in an emotional way, because it's such an emotional medium.
That's what I was going to ask you was, sometimes these biopics can be, as you well know, and you've made some great ones, Frost Nixon and, A Beautiful Mind. And then obviously these documentaries about real people. Sometimes people make short, like they take a year out of somebody's life or an event or,
right.
Be like a Pollock or something. Right. You told the story in opera. Right. You told all the colors, right. And he had such an incredible life.
Yeah, and his childhood, it became apparent that his childhood, even though in all of his interviews, and he was so interviewed, we also realized that he could tell most of his own story.
The archival's immense.
And he's so charismatic and entertaining to watch, on shows. But his childhood so informed, much of what he did, and that we felt it was important. And again, in that sort of operatic way, try to make it epic.
Yeah, and also, actually, I was thinking, what would you have asked him if he was here?
Oh my Lord! Well, I certainly would have tried to drill down on the relationship with his father. Now, there's some interesting things. For example, in the Beatles documentary, there's a thing we could never put in the Beatles documentary because we couldn't get anyone to say it, that we learned, which was George Harrison, when they left, he was 22, 23, when they quit touring. Well, John Lennon had said the bigger than Jesus thing, and they forced them to get rid of the segregation in that concert, and they were burning their records and death threats and so forth. And the other guys weren't taking it very seriously. George Harrison's parents were mortified. So in the documentary, Paul says, George was the first one to speak up. And all we could ever get was that George didn't want to tour anymore. George was being harangued daily, like, why are you out there, son? And we never could get that in the documentary because no one would say it. And we had no way to sort of get that in there. So if we never really had anything where Pavarotti was really talking about his father, and he would say, my father, he was a baker, but he was a great tenor. But we kept hearing things like his father had stage fright or something, and things like that. So I would have really liked to drill down on how did it feel like to sort of achieve the thing that your father didn't. How did your father feel? I would have loved to have that, that kind of information.
I thought of you in relation to him in terms of being a performer for much of your life yourself, being on the road so much. Last time I saw you, you were off to do Hillbilly Elegy. Right. And, when I'm watching this wonderful film, he's taking his kitchen with him. He's taking his crew out to dinner. He doesn't like to be alone. How is it for you? Where were the points of relationship between you and?
He was a total extrovert. I'm not. He was a natural performer. I'm not. I love stories, and I discovered through the child acting that I liked being a part of the story, but I also began to see that I wanted to have more control in that, and I really wanted to tell the story. So I don't really relate to Pavarotti. I'm more in awe of him. Look, he behaved in ways that I would never support. I think, but the spirit, this sort of reaching for life, both in his art and in what he did personally, and then through philanthropy and so forth, it was so unlike me that I kind of wish that a bit of that recklessness would rub off. I don't think it will at this stage.
I love the story you told of Bono, the way that he goes and he collects him with the camera crew and makes friends with the housekeeper,
I mean, and
he's relentless. There's so many lessons to learn in this.
Also love what Bono, his interview was amazing. I wasn't there. Nigel has known Bono for years, and I was shooting something and couldn't go to do that interview, and I'm so sorry that I couldn't because that's a great interview. I mean, we should find a way to put like the whole thing online or something.
I think you can just put it online.
It's a great interview
these days.
But he was really giving a gift to the family, but also to fans, and I think probably rather inadvertently letting us know what it means to be a singer and an aging singer too.
How do you feel about his relationship to charity as he got older? It seemed like as he got more successful, he felt almost a burden, but also responsibility, and also in a way it was a pleasure for him to be able to provide.
Yes.
How does that relate to you? How do you relate to that personally?
Well, I recognize that, but it was interesting that he didn't need look, he'd always done, charity performances or this, that, and the other, where all he had to do was show up. He didn't start taking charge, I think, until he had that experience and that exposure to Princess Diana. And I know from one evening where we had a royal screening of Apollo 13, and Princess Diana was there. And we were in sort of private conversation long enough that I could see that she was totally committed to this mission of finding ways to change the world, finding ways to support programs that mattered. It wasn't a public situation; it was casual chat, and yet it's a little bit like, you could see that was her life's work, and I'm sure she had that effect on him. She drew him into the Red Cross Project, which there, and I think he loved it, and just as Deacon said in the that he discovered a higher calling, and I think he was kind of searching for something else. I think that's understandable. In some ways, I can't compare it to full-on philanthropy because it's still commerce to some extent. But for me, getting to delve into the documentary side of things, and I know doing Pavarotti and the Beatles is not socially earth-shattering, but for me, I'm finding it very rewarding and fascinating, and a great way to not only take advantage of Imagine Entertainment, our new executives who are involved in that, Justin Wilkes and Sarah Bernstein, who are remarkable, and this sort of lane that Imagine now wants to be in. But I'm developing, we're shooting a documentary about the fires and the year after the fire in Paradise, California. And this is one where we really don't know what the story is. We still don't know. We have a pretty good idea. We've been following some individuals. It's very powerful. It's very emotional. It gets political in places. It operates on a lot of levels. A great team in place working on it. And yet we still have another couple of months to shoot, and stories to follow. And we're still finding it, but I love what it's about, and I'm finding it, stimulating and rewarding, and I'm learning a lot working on it.
You've touched on many aspects of this question, but that brings me to this: the difference between doc and scripted, and for you, it is, yes, it's but the reason I wanted to play Pavarotti here, I wanted to bring it to the DGA, is because it is like an ode to artists. And in a way, it really looks at the intersection between the personal and the public life and the challenges of balancing your life as an artist. And I guess that's how you open the film. You open the film with Nicoletta saying, I was interested in Pavarotti the man.
Right.
And, what did you find? I guess I have two questions here. One, for you, it seems like you're really turned on by making documentaries, the learning, the not knowing, I guess, not knowing if you're going to make the high C, right?
Right. Yeah. And the deep dive, that kind of exploration. And it's also.
But this has the power to change lives.
Well,
I wanted my son to come to learn about being an artist,
Well, you know far better than I do, but what's fascinating, and now that you're directing scripted as well, it's what's interesting is how I did talk about there are some limitations built in. You have to be able to get somebody to say it or find the image or the interview or something, unless you're the voice, unless you're doing the narration, and then you're
free and available. I discovered that once. We Live in Public. I was like, I'm available. I can just walk outside.
Right, but you can say what you want to say, and then it's your editorial. Basically, that's what you're doing. But it's very interesting to identify, and this is where an editor like Paul Crowder is so gifted, to identify an idea and not quite have it, but find a way to suggest it. And I'm finding myself now staging scenes and shooting them a little bit differently to try to think about working that way, as opposed to just getting somebody to say the line of exposition.
So it's impacting your scripted work.
I really think it is. But
that's really interesting.
But the one thing that I did find, and that it's given me a little more confidence with every film, is that my instincts about sort of really finding the story, which is really only ever happens in post. You try your best at the script stage. You do everything you can when you're shooting to try to be thorough and delve into the ideas and get the shots and the performances that'll help tell that story. But you really don't know until you put it together and start looking at it yourself and showing it to others and really finding out, the way that this film communicates with others. And then you get into that next very important level of work, which is, all right, well, how do we discover what it is and maximize that? Whatever I might have thought it was before, what is it really and what can it really be? And I find that applies to the doc process beautifully. It's sort of a heightened version. But all my documentarian collaborators on all this, like we were looking at a bunch of footage for Rebuilding Paradise, which is the name of this doc, and some amazing stuff, some emotional stuff, but we don't really know what the story is yet. And I'm kind of, we're 3/4 of the way through. I'm kind of looking at everybody, and they're crying, they're beaming, they're happy. And I said, yeah, but do we know what the third act's going to be? No, we don't know that. but it's going to be great. And they just have this total trust in that. And in the ideas and just sort of the spirit of it they're gonna find that way. And that's great. That's a different kind of, a particular kind of high wire act. All these art forms, every process has the high wire. It
really does. It's about taking those chances like he took. Doing a recital instead of an opera and loving that. And then
knowing he's not sure he can hit the high C.
The high C. He's 9 of them in a show, and he never once is he sure that he's going to make any. Yeah. He knows but he knows the elements to put in, right? And my next question was about trust. He said he would not exist without it. How do you handle that? You have been through so many films and so many different teams, and here you are stepping into this new realm. And I've worked with Mark, I've worked with Paul. They're fantastic collaborators. But, it's not the same thing as Brian Grazer, who you've been with your entire career.
Yeah.
Tell me about, and trust for your actors. Tell me about your relationship to trust, not only in others, but in yourself.
Well, I've grown up with a kind of process. Now, the doc process is quite different, but mostly it's kind of like post production, and some planning and shooting, but mostly, it's about what you're going to do in the editing room, unless it's a field documentary where you're out, trying to get the interview under duress or something,
You always actually have to. I always say 70% is in the field and 70% because docs are so hard.
Yeah.
It's about 140 or whatever. I don't know the math, but yeah. Something like that.
I'm most comfortable. There are two places where I really feel at ease, and one's at home with Cheryl and the gang, and the other's on a set or working on this stuff. So I do trust the people, especially the people who are of the caliber that I'm, have the good fortune of being able to work with. I'm excited for what the collaboration can yield, and yes, I do trust that they're going to accept my role in all of it, in the process. But they also can see that I'm very eager to try to draw the best out of them, and that's been the kind of equilibrium that as a director, that I've tried to establish and live by. It's not perfect, feathers get ruffled, people get mad, sometimes people get fired, but not very often. Mostly. I feel like I if somebody's sort of excited and engaged, we're going to be able to work together, and that's about all it takes. And I feed off the differences. I benefit from it. So as much as I love working with people that I have a shorthand with and a relationship with, it's also very, very good for me to be in a situation where it's a creative dialogue with people who we don't have a shorthand. We have to really sit down and talk it through, and that's useful.
And it's also an interesting, I meant also in trust in yourself, because it is such a different process, to let the film speak, to not know what the third act is, so deep into the game, And
I use a similar process, and by the way, again, I just can't say enough about Nigel, Paul, Mark. I mean, they're teaching me so much. Also, Justin and Sarah now at Imagine.
I love those too.
So I'm enjoying working in this field, but I'm also learning a hell of a lot from people who've dedicated years and years to this as a discipline, and I trust that. Mm-hmm. I trust them to take from me what I can offer, but also to just make sure we give this subject in the film everything that it really needs and deserves. But so it's incredibly exciting.
Yeah, it's just an interesting relationship as a director between putting what you should put into a film, or asking that question, or pushing for that one element, and then stepping out of the way and letting the material speak.
Yes.
Speak, it's almost like this ease you have to allow in.
Whatever it is, I think you have to finally let the film, the TV show, or the documentary finally speak to you. And there's one thing that I do with the docs that I also do with all of my scripted projects, and I've always been very rigorous about this. Is I do a lot. I screen it a lot, and I screen it for people, and I get people to fill out questionnaires. And I list the scenes, and I ask them to evaluate individual scenes, and it's pretty rigorous what I put people through, and they don't get paid anything for that, but it's great. And I just experimented with it. I didn't do it on the first documentary, but I did it with the Beatles. It really helped.
Helps a lot.
Did it again on Pavarotti, and that's where you begin to understand the film. Now you're beginning to understand, how is the film talking to the audience, really talking to the audience, and what are they getting out of it? And how can you reconcile the ideas that you were hoping to express versus what really is landing? When should you abandon what you were, your initial instinct told you was vitally important? Or when should you go back and shore that up and see if you can actually,
Make something of it,
land with the audience.
Yeah, totally. What did you let go of? What'd you leave us blind to in Pavarotti? What'd you discover that we don't see on screen?
Well, again, I was most interested in this stuff with the father. The greatest, rawest thing that we got were the interviews with the family, and we have the best of that. We didn't leave anything behind there. But I thought they were very brave because the feelings are still kind of raw. They get along with Nicoletta. Nicoletta gets along with them. They all have this thing in common, which is the legacy. But they're private. Adwa and the girls don't really want to be out there. And yet there've been a number of, good solid documentaries that just sort of looked at his professional life. But to make it a journey, to give it that depth, to the sort of the excitement and also the price, the toll on the artist and their loved ones of the journey, we really needed them to be willing to talk to us and talk to us openly, and they really did. And all their interviews were done in different places, they weren't all in the same house doing it, listening to each other's interviews, and it was so powerful. And I didn't know that the way they'd all rallied around the deathbed and that Madeline had come to, and none of that all just sort of emerged because that wasn't written about or explained to us. But the Adwa saying time kind of heals in a way I think she gave us all a bit of a gift there, understanding how
that was incredible.
Without forgetting, there's forgiveness, a demonstration of it.
She even called him a great man.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that was something, and we can leave on this note because they're telling us we have to leave. We can't stay forever. But just that he meant, despite his flaws, and I love a film that shows the flaws, but also just shows what an incredible man, to make everyone feel so loved, to sing the aria to the parents, to make and even his wife, who he was so unfaithful to for so long, for her to feel that he was really an extraordinary person and she loved him dearly and offered him spaghetti on his deathbed, we all should live such a life.
Well, and his daughter's coming around. I mean, we did about, I think 53 interviews. I'm not sure how many are in the film, maybe 25 or 30. But very interesting because people were, willing to acknowledge the warts, but to a person, they wanted to be there and celebrating him. They wanted to express their appreciation for having had a relationship with him, even if at some point they'd been frustrated, disappointed, or felt, let down. The majority don't feel that way. Only, it's not like he left a trail of tears. Most people just had nothing but adoration. But on the personal side, the family, there was pain, and Madeline and others.
And it opens with him acknowledging, or actually is it towards the end that he says, I guess I was a better parent.
Yeah.
I wish I was a little bit more there for the family.
Well, that was another gift. That was the most, that's the most frank moment that you get with Pavarotti, because otherwise these are all TV interviews, and he's
such intimate footage. She gave you everything, Nicoletta?
Yeah.
How much, like hours?
Well, it wasn't hours and hours, but I mean, it was
very powerful.
A lot. And but those testimonials, that her actually, interviewing him, and the sound was terrible. Chris Jenkins, the mixer, did a fantastic job with the film. I've worked with him many times, and he did a great job of digging out the sound, especially in some of these old
home videos,
worn out videos. Yeah.
Yeah, another thing I'm struck by is him acknowledging, or towards the end, you say that he never listened to his own work, and he didn't. He said, "I sang that okay" to his daughter.
Well, that's that perfectionism, striving. I think he expected a lot of himself because here's one thing I relate to. I don't relate to him very much. Here's something. He really respected the art form, and he was willing to work and work and work to live up to what he thought the art form and the audiences who appreciated it deserved. And he was always humble about that. I mean, at the same time, he knew what he'd achieved, but like he said to old Tony Randall, it's never good enough. I'm never happy. And that's by all accounts true. He was driven. He was driven. I think he felt blessed, as Nicoletta said at one point, to have had the opportunity to achieve this through, in opera. But he never fully, he never felt entitled around it. I think there was a period, a pretty long period, where when we mention it, he was canceling a lot. And that's that sort of period, where we used the Pagliacci, the sad clown aria, to sort of demonstrate where he was, that he was kind of stuck in this odd place. And I think the philanthropy, and then later, I think the love with Nicoletta really gave him a reason to want to matter, to continue to matter.
Yeah, well, there is that interplay always as an artist where you kind of you might have a bad day and you have to go on set and pretend, or you don't know really in the moment and you have to decide whether you're going to admit that or not. And he said, how can I pretend, but he did.
Well, there were a number of the arias that going back to my original hope that we could sort of do an opera about Pavarotti using the arias. And what we found is there were a number of strong performances of specific arias, but what we all began to see was this possibility of choosing the performance where he was roughly the age where he was going through a particular thing that that the aria might reflect in his personal life, and by doing that, I felt, and in watching some of these close-ups, and you got to thank some of these live TV directors. I mean, my God, some of this coverage is just tremendous. But, looking at it, there are a number of times when going through the footage with Paul and everybody, I would say, look, as somebody who directs performances, I feel like in that one, he's in it. I think he's all the way in it. And usually those were the times when he was roughly the age where whatever he's singing about, was probably resonating with him on a slightly more personal level.
Bono says, if it's all the truth of his life is in the cracks in the voice. Yeah. That's not bad. I have to wrap up, but I have to thank you for making this beautiful
Thanks for
film.
Coming, everybody.
Thank you for sharing all of your insights, Ron. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to another DGA Q&A. You can find past episodes of The Director's Cut wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're enjoying our show, please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes or whatever platform you use. We'd love to hear your feedback, and you can help fellow cinephiles find the show. Thanks again for listening, and have a great week. This podcast is produced by the Directors Guild of America. Music is by Dan Wally.